Morning, the Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order. We were delaying our start a little bit so that our ranking member would have time to join us in committee after introducing a bill in a different committee, and he's now present in the committee meeting room. So we're going to try to keep to starting at 10:30 as best we can throughout session, and appreciate everyone's time and attention to that. Thank you for those of you in the committee meeting room and those of you following online as well, and for staff being present and working like you do. We are going to hear today an update from our judicial branch presented by Sean Jurgensen, special counsel to the Chief Justice. However, want to ask first, before we get to that, for any requests for bill introductions. Sure, come on up. Please introduce yourself and who you're with.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber of Commerce with two bill drafts that we would respectfully ask for an introduction of. The first one would be RS 0209. That is a bill modifying the prejudgment interest rate. And the second would be RS 0369, which deals with disclosure of third-party financing. That was Senate Bill 152 from last year. But if you guys need any more details, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, then the bills are so introduced.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other requests for bill introduction from anyone in the committee meeting room or on the committee? Seeing none, then we will turn then to the judicial branch update by Mr. Sean Jurgensen, special counsel to the Chief Justice. Welcome back to committee, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Sean Jurgensen with the Kansas Judicial Branch. Thank you for the invitation today to discuss judicial branch update, specifically on our operations. And I'm going to turn my attention here in a second to the letter that Stephanie Smith, who joins me today in the gallery, that she pens to the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee under old 2021 HB 2078, which is now codified at KSA 223402L. And but before I do that, before we turn our attention to the letter, this morning we left at each of your chairs a copy, and I know that I had given each of you a copy of the written State of the Judiciary report in your mailboxes, but again, for this morning's purposes, I want to give you that again so you can flip through it, and it gives you a current view of the initiatives and projects and the current status of your judiciary. And so please refer to that, and always reach out to us or the Chief Justice's chambers if you have any questions regarding judicial branch operations. Because candidly, no judicial branch update is complete without turning our attention to it. So in that report, as you thumb through it, you will see those projects that we've been working on, like the Rural Justice Initiative, which is designed to address the shortage of attorneys we have in rural Kansas. The Mental Health Summit. A lot of the issues that we encounter in the judiciary are driven by mental health issues like addiction, depression, and then finally it'll discuss the rollout of our new case management system and the self-help centers and all those other projects that are designed to increase access to justice. So, and again, before I get to the letter, I want to begin by thanking each of you, thanking this committee, thanking your colleagues in the legislature, both in the Senate and the House. Like I mentioned last year, the pandemic, all the issues that are associated with it, it presented a number of issues that could affect judiciary operations. Together in partnership, we have worked to address those situations, and this committee and your colleagues in the House and throughout the legislature, you fashioned a response that, like I reported to you last year, was working in the Kansas court system, and I'm happy to report that it continues to be working today. And I think that you'll be pleased with the overall report you will see from the data the Office of Judicial Administration has provided. And so, you have a copy of Stephanie's letter at your chair, and I want to, like I mentioned, this came from KSA 223402L, And Stephanie attached 4 attachments at the back of her letter that we're going to look at. But first, as you're turning to attachment 3, because I think usually everyone wants to focus on and discuss jury trials, and attachment 3 is the current status of jury trials, or at least the jury trials that were conducted in fiscal year 2022. And I want to make a note here because I don't want us to get lost in translation. The statute requires OJ to report data based on fiscal year. So July 1 of 21 through June 30 of 22. So this is not through December 31st of 2022. I just want to set that ground rule. And then also you should know, Madam Chair, our system at the judicial branch, it captures case data by definition. And so a particular case won't close until the entire definition is met. So for instance, because we're going to start discussing jury trials, a jury trial, Madam Chair, is not completed or terminated until you get through sentencing. And so there are instances where a jury trial is conducted, the individual is adjudged guilty, but sentencing hasn't occurred yet. And so if there's that gap in time before the fiscal year ended, it won't have captured that case. And so that's why I'm going to give you another little update on the verbally this morning for Sedgwick and Johnson County numbers, because those are the 2 biggest judicial districts we have. But like I mentioned, attachment 3 is the number of jury trials that were conducted in criminal cases, only criminal cases, Madam Chair, during fiscal year 22. And I wanted to start because I appreciate that in the judiciary, we speak in judicial districts, but not everybody understands which judicial district they live in. So Madam Chair, you, Senator Corson, and Senator Olson live in judicial district number 10. So as you're going down the column, the 10th is Johnson County. Senator Wilburn McPherson is the 9th. Senator Haley, Wyandotte is the 29th. Senator Bowers, Cloud is in the 12th. Senator Baumgardner, Miami is in the 6th. So as you scroll down there, those are the jury trial figures in FY22. I need to note, though, the 16 recorded jury trials, that number is 25 in Johnson County because of the give, like I was speaking on the definition section on terminating them. So there's technically 25 jury trials in Johnson County, not 16, so that's higher. Sedgwick County is a little higher. It's at 70 instead of 59. And so the grand total, instead of 309, it's instead we're closer to 330 to 340 statewide completed jury trials in FY22. And that's a significant increase over FY21. It's nearly quadruple because in FY21 there were 85 completed jury trials when we pulled this data last year. And so you can see that there's been significant movement in the number of criminal jury trials that have been conducted over the last fiscal year. And that doesn't include bench trials. There were approximately 280 bench trials during that same period of time. So in total, over 600 criminal trials statewide out of the 34,000 criminal cases that were terminated over the same period. And so you'll recall last year when I updated the committee, again, everyone likes to talk about jury trials, but historically speaking, very few criminal cases actually terminate as a result of a trial. It's usually less than 2%. The overwhelming majority, well, I shouldn't say overwhelming, the majority of cases resolve in guilty plea, diversion, dismissal, and it's actually very, very few that actually reach a jury trial. Now, a lot of cases are set for jury trial because that helps accelerate mediation or negotiations on resolving the case, but very few actually terminate. And so when you look at the approximate 600 cases that terminated in trial over fiscal year 22 out of the 34,000 we resolved, it's still 1.7%, give or take. So that's tracking with what we expect. And as you scroll down that list, just to give you an idea, the first judicial district there where it says 31 judicial trials, that's Leavenworth and Atchison County. Last year, that figure was 2. And so from 2 to 31 is a significant shift. 44 in the third, that's here in Shawnee County. The Shawnee County number in the third, Johnson County, Sedgwick, they all quadrupled year over year, number of jury trials. Saline doubled, and we visited last year about Saline County's criminal caseload when we were discussing adding additional judges across the state. Wyandotte went from 2 to 29. And so we see a significant jump in that judicial district. Same with Manhattan. That's the 21st, up to 16. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, these are only criminal trial figures. It does not include civil, juvenile offender, probate, domestic, all of the other areas of the law. Because give or take every year, we're resolving around 350,000 to 400,000 cases system-wide. So 34,000 is about a tenth. So criminal cases that are criminal cases are a fraction of our overall caseload in the judiciary. And so if you would flip to the page in front of that on Stephanie's letter, attachment 2, it'll give you the complete picture of termination type above and beyond simple or above and beyond jury trials and bench trials. And again, like I mentioned, you can see there at the bottom, almost 19,000 of those 34,000 cases are resolved by guilty plea. And I know it says 32.8. Sedgwick County's numbers, instead of being 2,500, they're at 3,900 resolved in the system. And so it moves it up to 34,000. And so, like I mentioned last year, it continues to be true this year, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Criminal cases are moving throughout the judiciary. One thing that that you will note from thumbing through all the attachments, you see that we've resolved 34,000 cases on attachment 2. And on the back one, attachment 4, is the number of filings in 2022. There were just under 32,000 criminal case filings last year. And so the clearance rate actually is greater than 100%. And which means we're terminating more criminal cases than were filed in 2022. And so not only do we feel positive about resolving the criminal jury trial caseload, but the actual entire statewide criminal caseload, fiscal year over fiscal year at least, it has also shrunk. So that's a good sign, we believe, in administering the court system. We anticipate that this trend will continue. You and your colleagues last year funded 23 additional judge positions that have now been positioned across the state. And so that additional capacity only allows us to process even more cases. It grows our capacity on the bench and allows us to do other things like specialty courts, which I'm going to mention here in a second. But as you scan the bottom of attachment 2, you will see that every single termination type is up, which you should expect with the figures I'm reporting this morning. And while I'm lucky enough to represent the judicial branch and tell you about the court system's response, please recall that it's more than just us. It's more than judges and our employees, who I care very much about, but it's also the prosecutors who are prosecuting these cases. It's the criminal defense bar, Heather Cessna's unit at the public defender's office. It's law enforcement officials who are making thousands of appearances in court hearings across the state to testify. It's other witnesses. It's the thousands of Kansans that we are issuing juror summonses to. It's Scott Schultz at the Sentencing Commission, all the work they're doing. So it's not just us, please. We're not taking a victory lap here, but all of this works together to keep the stool steady, if you will, all those different prongs. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't take a lot of work. Jury trials take a lot of resources for the court system to prepare for. Like I mentioned, all the subpoenas, all the summons, prosecutors investing a lot of time preparing for a case, criminal defense counsel preparing for a case, clerk's office doing everything that they do. And because it takes so much energy, it is not unusual for a jury trial to settle in the 11th hour, right before case goes, right? When you get closer and the pressure begins to build, it inevitably settles, right? And so because we only have so many courtrooms that you can conduct jury trials in, we don't like courtrooms to sit empty when we have other criminal cases that could go. We want to go. And so to address that, so we're not wasting courtroom time, we engage in what's called stacking. And stacking is nothing more than local judge seeing, okay, I have 4 criminal cases that are ready to go to trial. I'm going to assign a hierarchy to these 4. And so there'll be case A, B, C, D. And all 4 are set for the exact same date and time for this courtroom. And so on Saturday night, before Monday trial starts, if judge, hears from both of the lawyers and says, this case is resolved, we resolved it this morning, we're going to enter a plea, so we don't need to go. Judge then tells attorneys for case B, you're up. And then if the attorneys in case B say, well, Your Honor, we settled too this morning, then it goes to C, so on and so forth. And so that's if you ever hear of stacking, that's what stacking means. Another thing that isn't explicitly reflected on attachment to the termination type is the amount of mediation that's happening in your Kansas courts. Mediation, did you have a question, Senator Bowers? Oh, no, okay. Mediation is simply it's a conference, a confidential conference where you have a detached, neutral, either fellow judge who's not going to hear the case or a retired judge come in, and they meet, the prosecutor meets with the judge and says, here's my case. Here's the evidence I have to prove my case. And the judge can, or the arbitrator, the mediator, whoever it may be, can say, okay, all right, here's the weaknesses, here's the strengths. And then you go to the other side, the defense counsel, and they say, here's our defense, here's the evidence we have for that. And then they go through the same process. And it helps parties reach a resolution of the case without the need for trial. And so what this also reflects through pleas and dismissals of other counts or cases is that process also at work, which drives down our criminal caseload and makes courtrooms more available for other jury trials that have to go. And so the data is positive, Madam Chair. And so we ask ourselves, where are we at today? Where does that leave us? And a couple of years ago, you and Senator Thompson asked, what's the status of our current jury trial caseload? And so because we reported on that last year to the committee, that's something that the Chief Justice and our team has tracked for your committee. And the numbers remain positive. Johnson County, we're seeing the exact same tracking that we've seen over the years, that they're moving, their jury trial caseload is continuing to shrink. In Sedgwick County, they're going to set 1,250 cases for jury trial this year, which will help accelerate moving those through. But Chief Judge Gehring in Wichita reports that he anticipates they'll have 75 trials this fiscal year, which is an increase from 20 when they had 70, but it's tracking in the same spot. Wyandotte, 2 years ago, their jury trial caseload was at 200, then it shrunk to about 150. Today it's at 90, and so it's continuing. Our urbans are continuing to move through. And that's a theme, Madam Chair, is that essentially the jury trial caseload exists in the urban counties where it has always existed. In the out counties, it's essentially gone. For instance, in Ellis County, it was at 32 during the pandemic. Today it's 0 to 7. Depending on how many are set. In McPherson, during the pandemic, is at 145. This year, they're expecting it to track like last year where they have 1. And so, again, it's completely shrunk. And so these are all positive returns that we're seeing and that we continue to anticipate happening next fiscal year. And so that's the report on Stephanie's letter and the status of our current jury trial caseload. It's positive. There's nothing that we're seeing from the data or what our chief judges are reporting to us that give us cause for concern to address any of the issues or mechanisms you've armed us with in the judiciary. And so since I have the chance to visit with you this morning, the final handout that we left at your chair is our specialty court handout. I know that the Chief Justice visited with you last Wednesday during her State of the Judiciary address on specialty courts. You'll find more information about specialty courts in the written report. These remain an incredible tool and asset for the judiciary that affect our overall jury trial numbers. Recall, specialty courts are simply a unique docket of cases in district court where the defendants have a common denominator, if you will. They're either all veterans, or they've all been charged with a drug crime, so on and so forth. And this specialty docket, where all the defendants have this common denominator, is geared toward addressing the underlying factors that may be contributing to their involvement in the criminal justice system. So for instance, it could be a mental health issue in a mental health docket. It could be addiction when a drug docket. And so what the docket does is there's a team in specialty court of prosecutors, defense counsel, law enforcement officers, treatment providers, counselors, school counselors, as the case may be if it's a juvenile docket. And quite simply, that intense supervision is designed to break this cycle of recidivism. And it's good, in my opinion, it's good, efficient use of government resources because it's a fraction of the cost of traditional criminal justice outcomes. You keep them in their home communities with their families. It likely reduces, other costs that are associated with home-based services in the executive branch. And in a lot of specialty courts, they have to maintain a job back home. So those are all the things that we use to help individuals get out of the criminal justice system and hopefully reduce their chances of coming back. And so I don't want to miss an opportunity to put that back in front of you, because I know that a lot of individuals are talking about specialty courts these days, and Chairwoman Warren serves on the committee that's going to help guide specialty court spending from a bill that you passed last year, which was great. Senator Baumgardner was chair of an interim committee, the Joint Committee on Juvenile Justice, or on Corrections and Juvenile Justice. She and her vice chair brought their interim committee that Senator Corson was on, Senator Bowers was on that committee, to a drug court graduation, Madam Chair, in Shawnee County over the interim, which was pretty slick. If you haven't had the chance to attend a specialty court graduation, you need to run toward it. It's an incredible thing. It's pretty impressive. So that's essentially your judicial branch update in conjunction with the State of the Judiciary report, Madam Chair. Are there any questions on this or?
Well, thank you, Mr. Jurgensen, for the report. And I'm glad to see that with the legislation that we've worked on this last year, we have opportunity in Kansas for growing the number of specialty treatment courts or specialty courts, as you've put on the handout there. I think that will be a great service to Kansans and on the road to rehabilitation versus recidivism. So thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. Are there questions for Mr. Jurgensen? Sure, Senator Haley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly want to echo what you said. I was solo sponsor for specialty courts bills years ago, and just glad to see that that they have caught traction in the last year and beyond, and that we're seeing those various divisions addressed, areas addressed. One thing, a specialty court, though, I didn't know about, never heard of the home specialty court.
Yeah. So that was a specialty court in Emporia, and what it used truancy actions to hook. The parents would, hook is the wrong word. Parents would participate with their child in the truancy action to get to what was actually driving the truant behavior, and so that the participants on the specialty court team would work with parents and the youth on how do we correct, how they're running afoul of that rule. Yeah,
I see. I appreciate it. So
yeah.
I was thinking that may be more domestic related though too. That's not a specialty court that looks at domestic or some.
No, it's
ongoing.
not. It wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't capturing domestic cases like divorce, child support, issues like that.
Thank you, and Madam Chair, Mr. Jorgensen. In all the cases that you cited, there's some concern about speedy trial when we elongated the time for speedy trial, I guess, in response to the pandemic. And many of us, I was concerned as to some of the rights that may be abridged because of the expansion of that. Are you aware of any that have come back to the many cases that you cite here? And thank you for the thoroughness of that, where there has been some case or some cases where that extension that went beyond their normal statutory ability somehow has come back to suggest that they may not have reached their day in court or justice because of that abridgment of our regular statute?
I am not aware of any case yet challenging the extension, if that's what you're asking me. No one's reported to me anything to that. That doesn't mean that there's not one pending. That just means that I haven't been told about it or I haven't heard about it.
It was a great concern during the discussion around this table and others that there may be someone whose, some rights were, abridged because we had to extend it because of the pandemic and inability to have these trials. So I still remain curious about that. And I thank you very much for the report, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Haley.
Thank you for that question, Senator Haley. And to remind the committee and the public, the report that we were hearing from today from the judiciary is a result of that bill that we worked on in 2021, where certain stakeholders came forward and said, because we have a backlog of jury trials, because we can't gather jurors together in a room and get everyone together in a room, would you take a look at state statutory speedy trial rights? And as a result, we decided as the legislature to suspend statutory speedy trial rights, not your constitutional right to a speedy trial, though in extending it to make it non-effective until May 1st, 2023, I suspect we will be asked again this session as a committee to take a look at what do we do with statutory speedy trial rights. And to help us answer that question that we're anticipating, the report was submitted. There were 4 parts of the report that the legislature required. And thank you for that report. And one of them was the number of pending criminal trials on January 1st of 23 of this year, to help the legislature determine, well, if there's a bill to suspend or extend statutory speedy trial rights, what is in the backlog? So you've said there aren't any concerns. Do you have an opinion on what we'll be looking at on state statutory speedy trial rights?
So in fairness, Madam Chair, none of our chief judges across the state have said to me that they believe an extension should happen, but at the same time, none of them have said to me an extension should not happen. And so these are the figures that we have for January that we pulled under the statute. But if there is a bill filed and the committee would like us to visit with our chief judges more and bring updated data as we get into February, March, or whenever that case may be, we would certainly welcome that.
Appreciate that opportunity, and we'll see if there's a bill headed our way as we move forward through the session. Thank you. Yep. Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here today. You did mention the additional judgeships that were added through legislative increase in funding for those. Miami County is one area that has a new judgeship. They are struggling desperately to find a location for any of those hearings to take place, since we have a very old courthouse that has a single courtroom. So I was just curious, are any of the other judgeships or communities struggling to, one, find a location for trials to safely be heard, and also that funding component? Because it's one thing to expand the number of judges and the support staff, but what we all know is you've got to have a location for them. And so we truly are struggling with that.
Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court authorizes our chief judges to use outside facilities if they need to conduct any portion of the jury trial proceeding. Not necessarily the jury trial itself after the jury is impaneled. And so one of the questions we asked our chief judges last weekend was, are you still using any outside facilities? Because some of our courthouses are older, and they weren't built for social distancing, frankly, during a pandemic. And so we would use outside facilities, especially when you call in all these jurors for a murder trial and they got to spread out during the pandemic. And so one chief judge reported, and it was in Wyandotte County, that there's still a facility across from the Wyandotte County Courthouse that they are still calling jurors into because of the volume. And it's not necessarily a social distancing thing, it's just the number of jurors you have to bring in for the caseload in Wyandotte County. And so that's the only instance where we're still using an outside facility. But as far as your direct question, I did hear that from Chief Judge Harth. She and I visited a couple of times about that happening in Miami County. But honestly, she's the only one I've heard from.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Last session, at the request of the judiciary, the legislature changed the funding structure for the judicial branch and is now funded from the state general funds. Could you speak a moment on how that's going? And I think, did we hear a request from the Chief Justice last week for an increase in pay raises for judiciary employees? If you could address those two issues. And then Senator Haley, I think, has a question. No.
comment. We've been doing that in Wyandotte County at the old federal courthouse with the jury jury trial way before the pandemic. That was all. Thank you.
Yeah, it's volume related. It's not necessarily pandemic or anything like that related. Yes, so correct. Last year, the legislature addressed one of the issues that has plagued the judiciary for years, which is the volatile funding, that's associated with fees. And so now, all of those fees are still being collected in the court system. They're just being deposited directly to the state treasury, to the state general fund account, for lack of a better word, instead of it being deposited directly into judicial branch accounts. And so instead, because in the past when we would submit our budget, we would have to project out how much in filing fee we would collect so that we could base our budget off of that. So we still do that. We base our projection and we submit our budget, and our budget is now entirely SGF funded. It's going great. The fees are still being collected. Those are being remitted to the state treasury. Nothing is happening in that regard. We are incredibly grateful to each of you, your colleagues, legislative leadership, and the governor for signing it. But that's going well, and we're pleased to report that. The biggest factor for us is stability. There were times in the past, because of the way cases are filed, cases dip in certain months like December or July when people are taking vacations. Sometimes I've joked with the data person in OJA, you actually see a dip in divorce cases in February, which should not be unexpected. But things like that. So it provides greater stability for the judicial branch. And then, yes, to answer your second question, Madam Chair, our budget is 91%-ish personnel. And so the overwhelming majority of our budget, we are a branch of people, and we provide services to the public through our personnel. And so the majority of our budget pays for the wages of our employees and the judges. And so last year, the legislature brought our employees to 2021 market rate. And it was the first time that has happened in decades, probably. And so our employees were brought to 2021 market rate. However, because of market forces and inflationary pressure, the value of those wages that you set for us to be able to recruit and retain employees is eroding. And so the court, when we submitted our budget this year, they asked for an 8.5% cost of living increase to address that inflation. That it actually mirrors the rate that KLRD reported out on during the joint budget bill committee hearing. And then, so that's the request that the Chief Justice put in for employees. And then on the judge pay side of it, sorry, I got tongue tied there for a second. On the judge pay side of it, we continue the salaries that the judicial branch can offer for judge positions. It lags competitiveness in the legal market, quite frankly. And the wages that attorneys can command, not only in the private sector, but increasingly even in the public sector, exceed what we can offer judges to take the bench. And so to address that, to address the competitiveness, because we're not getting the number of well-qualified applicants that Kansans have come to expect, we've asked for judge pay increases so that those positions are more competitive, because we are not competing when it comes to that position. And I say that, and it's not based upon any sort of reluctance on the legislature's part in these last couple of years, because we have worked together to begin to address judge pay these last couple of years, and we are incredibly grateful for that. And like I mentioned over the interim to the special committee on state employee compensation that was convened, there was a 9-year fiscal period where judicial positions didn't get any increase. But during that same period of time, Madam Chair, the legal market, the wages that attorneys earn, continued to increase, and that caused a gap. And so we're still addressing that gap. And so that's where it comes from. It comes from our inability to recruit, and we see it when we have positions, like in the 6, when you're so close to Johnson County, and it can be tough across the state to compete. We struggle to compete in Western Kansas because you don't have enough attorneys in parts of the state, and so the attorneys we do have there, they're one of the only shops in town, and so they earn a good living. And so it's hard to compete in that situation. So it's not just a Johnson County thing. It's not just an Eastern Kansas thing. It's across the state. And so we're trying to address it with the bar through the Rural Justice Initiative, the capital B bar, not the Bar Association. And then also, but the hard truth is that we're not competing. And so that's why we have to continue to take a look at it. And so we submitted it.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, then thank you very much, Mr. Jurgensen, for your presentation today. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And committee, we have in your packet of information you received today are the committee rules for 2023 session. So please take a look at those when you can. And with that, then we are adjourned. Thank you.